It began with a short walk to a corner shop and ended 70 miles away. This is the true story of Sarah Jane Harper. Some crimes begin with a warning. A stranger follows someone home, a door is forced open, or a threat appears before the violence. Other crimes begin so quietly that the danger only becomes visible after someone has vanished. On a Wednesday evening in March of 1986, 10-year-old Sarah Jane Harper left her home in Morley, near Leeds, to visit a nearby corner shop. The errand should have taken only a few minutes. Sarah never made it home, and the reason would remain hidden for years. Morley was a working-class town about 5 miles southwest of Leeds, shaped by generations of textile production and the gradual decline of local industry. Its terraced streets, narrow lanes, and neighborhood shops created the kind of environment where short trips could feel familiar and routine. Sarah lived with her family in Brunswick Place. Public records reveal little about her private life, though contemporary reporting described her as a Salvation Army choir girl. She was 10 years old, known within her community, and still young enough for a simple family errand to form part of an ordinary evening. On March 26, 1986, Sarah went to a corner shop close to her home. The trip has often been described as a journey to buy bread. A report published during the later murder trial placed her disappearance shortly after 8 o'clock that evening while she was returning from the store. Some later accounts give a time close to 7:55, but the strongest contemporary wording remains less exact. What can be established is that Sarah was near home, traveling a short and familiar route when she disappeared. No reliable public record provides a complete account of Sarah's final movements. There is no verified transcript of her last conversation, no confirmed account of the exact point where she was taken, and no witness statement that explains precisely how the abduction unfolded. The absence of those details became one of the investigation's greatest difficulties. Sarah had vanished from a small area without leaving behind a clear sequence for detectives to follow. Her family reported her missing, and police began searching the streets around Brunswick Place. Officers questioned local residents and examined possible sightings. One early lead centered on Peel Street, where a man had reportedly been seen looking into an alleyway. Police traced him, investigated his presence, and eliminated him from the inquiry. A local businessman offered a reward of £1,000 for information, but the appeal produced no immediate breakthrough. The early investigation faced a basic question that could not yet be answered. Had Sarah been taken by someone who knew the neighborhood or by a stranger passing through it? A local offender might have understood the side streets and footpaths around Brunswick Place. A passing driver, by contrast, could have taken her beyond Morley before the search had fully begun. At that stage, both possibilities remained open, and nothing connected the case to a known suspect. For 24 days, Sarah remained missing. Then, on April 19, 1986, her body was found in the River Trent near Nottingham. Later reports have often associated the discovery with the Wilford area, though the exact point is not consistently identified in the strongest surviving sources. The distance from Morley was roughly 70 miles. Sarah had disappeared close to her home in West Yorkshire, but she was recovered in another region entirely. That distance changed the direction of the case. The person responsible had access to transportation and had moved Sarah far beyond the area where police first searched. The separation between the abduction site and the recovery site also meant that evidence, witnesses, and police responsibilities were divided across different locations. What initially appeared to be a local disappearance now carried the characteristics of a mobile offender. The medical findings were deeply disturbing. A contemporary inquest report stated that Sarah died from asphyxia. Later court proceedings described severe sexual violence, and forensic testimony presented years afterward suggested that Sarah may have been alive, though possibly unconscious, when she entered the water. Without the complete original post-mortem report, the exact medical sequence should not be stated more precisely than the public record allows. The confirmed facts are that Sarah was abducted, subjected to serious violence, and left in the river far from Morley. 2 days after her body was found, senior officers representing more than 20 police forces met at Scotland Yard. They were examining possible links among a number of child abductions and murders across Britain. The meeting had reportedly been arranged before Sarah's body was recovered, showing that investigators were already concerned about patterns crossing regional boundaries. Young girls had disappeared from different communities, and some had later been found many miles away. Among those cases were the murders of 11-year-old Susan Maxwell and 5-year-old Caroline Hogg. Susan disappeared in 1982, and Hogg vanished the following year. Their bodies were discovered far from the places where they had last been seen. At the time, those geographic similarities raised suspicion, but they did not identify the person responsible. Detectives still needed a name, a vehicle, and a way to prove that one offender had moved through all of the relevant locations. That name was Robert Black. Born in Scotland in 1947, Black worked as a delivery driver for a company that distributed advertising posters throughout the United Kingdom. His job placed him on the road for extended periods and gave him legitimate reasons to visit towns where he had no personal ties. He drove a van, traveled across police jurisdictions, and could appear in a community without attracting unusual attention. Black also had a history of sexual offending against young girls. Official court records later referred to relevant convictions from his youth, including offenses committed when he was 16 and 19. Still, he was not identified as Sarah's killer during the original investigation. His criminal history, occupation, and travel pattern had not yet been brought together in a way that exposed what he was doing. The turning point came on July 14, 1990, in Stowe, in the Scottish borders. A witness saw a young girl being pulled into a blue transit van and alerted the authorities. Police stopped the vehicle soon afterward. Inside the rear of the van, they found a 6-year-old girl who had been abducted and sexually assaulted. She had been restrained inside a sleeping bag, but she was alive. The driver was Robert Black. His arrest gave police direct evidence of how he could approach a child, force her into a van, and leave the area quickly. It also opened the door to a much larger investigation. Detectives began reconstructing his movements over a period of years using fuel receipts, delivery schedules, and records of known work routes. The task required investigators to compare thousands of miles of travel with unsolved disappearances across Britain. When Black's routes were placed beside the locations connected to murdered children, the pattern became difficult to dismiss. Official court records later stated that on the day Sarah disappeared, Black made a delivery less than 150 yards from her home. That detail placed him in the immediate area at the relevant time. It did not reveal the exact moment of the abduction, but it provided the geographic connection investigators had lacked for years. The same process linked Black to Susan Maxwell and Caroline Hogg. His work records placed him near significant locations in their cases, while the circumstances of the crimes shared striking features. The victims were young girls. They disappeared from public places. Their bodies were transported over substantial distances. Black's arrest in Stowe demonstrated that he had both the means and the willingness to abduct a child into his van. The investigation also exposed missed opportunities. Reporting after Black's conviction argued that delivery drivers had not been examined closely enough around the relevant locations. Black had been absent from a major suspect list because investigators chose not to include certain categories of earlier, comparatively minor offenses. Expanding the search would have added around 33,000 names, creating a major administrative burden, but it might have also brought Black under scrutiny. Another missed connection emerged from an incident in the Nottingham area in 1988. According to later reporting, a bank security camera recorded Black's van during a suspected attempted abduction. The importance of the image was not recognized at the time. Viewed in isolation, it was one fragment among many. Viewed after his arrest, it became part of a disturbing pattern that had been forming across several police regions. Black went on trial at Newcastle Crown Court in April of 1994. He pleaded not guilty to charges involving Sarah Harper, Susan Maxwell, and Caroline Hogg. The prosecution's case depended on a combination of evidence rather than a single confession or forensic match. His documented travel, his proximity to the relevant locations, the similarities between the crimes, and the circumstances of his arrest in Stowe were presented together. The legal argument relied heavily on what is known as similar fact evidence. Prosecutors asked the jury to consider whether the shared features of the cases were too distinctive to be dismissed as coincidence. Black's occupation gave him access to each area. His van provided a means of transporting a child. His movements could be reconstructed through company records. His known behavior in 1990 showed a method consistent with the earlier abductions. On May 19, 1994, the jury found Robert Black guilty of murdering Sarah Harper, Susan Maxwell, and Caroline Hogg. He was also convicted of related abduction offenses. Black received life sentences with a minimum term of 35 years. The verdict came more than 8 years after Sarah vanished from Morley. The conviction established legal responsibility, but it did not produce a full account of Sarah's final hours. Black did not provide a truthful and complete confession. The exact location of the abduction remains uncertain in the public record. His precise route after leaving Morley has never been fully established, and the point where Sarah entered the River Trent has not been proven through a complete public reconstruction. Black's crimes extended beyond the 3 murders tried in Newcastle. In 2011, he was convicted in Northern Ireland of kidnapping and murdering 9-year-old Jennifer Cardy, who disappeared in 1981. During that trial, forensic testimony highlighted similarities between Jennifer's death and Sarah's. The comparison strengthened the picture of a mobile offender targeting young girls in different parts of the United Kingdom. Black was suspected of involvement in other disappearances and murders, but suspicion cannot be treated as a conviction. 4 murders were ultimately proven against him in court: those of Jennifer Cardy, Susan Maxwell, Caroline Hogg, and Sarah Harper. Other families were left with questions that Black never answered. Robert Black died in prison in Northern Ireland on January 12, 2016. He was 68 years old. After his death, former investigators spoke about the secrets he had taken with him. Sarah's grandmother, Marlene, told ITV that news of his death was the best news she had received in her life. Her words conveyed relief, but they also reflected decades of pain created by a crime that began with a few missing minutes. Sarah Harper's case no longer remains unsolved. A jury identified her killer, and later official judgments preserved the evidence that connected him to Morley. Yet the case still contains unanswered details because the man responsible refused to explain what he had done. That silence limits how completely Sarah's last journey can ever be reconstructed. What remains clear is the life at the center of the story. Sarah was not merely one name in a series of cases linked to Robert Black. She was a 10-year-old girl from Morley, a daughter and granddaughter whose disappearance changed her family forever. Her murder also exposed how a traveling offender could move between communities, exploit gaps between police jurisdictions, and remain hidden behind the appearance of ordinary work. The streets around Brunswick Place offered no visible warning that evening. Black's delivery route gave him a reason to be nearby, and nothing about a working van would have announced the danger it carried. Years later, a line in his employment records would place him within 150 yards of Sarah's home. That small measurement helped connect a child's disappearance in Morley to a killer whose crimes stretched across Britain. Sarah left home on March 26, 1986, and her family waited more than 8 years for a verdict. The law eventually named the man responsible, but no judgment could restore the life taken from her. Her story endures not because the errand was unusual, but because it was not. It was the kind of moment families trust every day, until one person turns it into something they can never forget.